Okay, our next testifier, we're going from Canada to California. Warren Klomp, the District Administrator of the California Board of Equalization. And also thank you coming to snowy, cold Albany in April.
First of all, thank you for inviting me and being here. Work for the Board of Equalization. We're really the sales tax arm for the state of California. My full-time job is managing one of the LA offices. My other full-time job was looking at sales suppression. So I will share what I have found in our experiences in California. I began to look at it in 2012. Much to my surprise, many states had laws, but no one had a program. So I reached to our friends from Canada, both Canadian Revenue and Quebec, and Professor Ainsworth for getting started. Really, our pilot project began in 2013 in the Los Angeles and Bay areas. So we only had so many offices participate. I was involved with the AB 781, which is the California law that became effective in 2014, both testifying in front of our state agency and the state senate on that. In 2014, learning a little bit, we decided to host a symposium. We invited Canadian Revenue, Quebec, Professor Ainsworth, and 24 states participated in that. So we could start something in the United States, at least exchanging our knowledge and making the issue more well-known than it was. We did training in 2014. 23 states came to California in the fall of 2014 to participate.
Did New York come?
We had one participant from New York Revenue. More or less, I've been the leader in California and probably the U.S. at least talking about this issue with other states. And recently, with the help of Marie, we went international in 2015 and started talking to Europe about it too. So we really just tried to learn what we could. As Canada discovered this in 1997, now we're in 2016 and the U.S. still isn't fully implemented on really looking at sales suppression. A couple things we learned from our agency. The first one was acceptance and recognition of sales suppression. And I would say not only within the tax agency, but with the public, the retailers. A lot of people don't know what that is. They may have heard of what a zapper is, but they don't really know what sales suppression is. And the sales suppression can be both internal employee theft. It could be, a zapper, phantomware, and other things like that. So recognizing really what it is and the economic impact, I think, was important. One of the things we had to do is really train staff on electronic records. How does the PO system work? How do records go through the system? How do they get into different files and folders? How to obtain the information and understand the different systems and the models that are out there and the different programs to open them and to look at that. So that's taken a long time. And then from talking to colleagues in Europe, that's also a long time endeavor because you need the Common Core people to keep learning that. Technology's changing all the time. Support of the program, both I would say from the public and within a tax agency, is important. Sounds simple, but isn't.
Right.
Share your results with other states. We have a core group of states we share results with. Europe does that. They have a core group, different tax agencies get together and form groups to talk. We have a core group now we're talking to. Because what you find is some of these sales suppression systems cross state lines. Some are local within California. Some come from Canada. Some come from Europe. Some come from China. But if you don't talk to each other, everyone's starting from ground zero.
Right.
And that sounds really simple, but we're getting better, but it really wasn't in existence. So we're really copying the European model on doing that. And that just takes, it helps everyone out. It helps all the agencies, the investigators, the auditors, everyone to look at it and exchange information in real time. The other thing that we really learned about is really electronic record retention, both from an agency point of view and from what's out there with taxpayers. Education, as you know, we always try to educate the public and taxpayers about that. One of the things we did when California law became into effect, we had Get a Receipt campaign. In other words, it sounds simple, but encouraging all the folks to get a receipt, because it's not only suppression, it's whether the sale is even recorded. Because if it's not recorded, even if you get data later, it's simply not there. So that campaign to do that. Look at your regulations. A lot of sales tax laws went into effect 40s, 30s, 50s. They're not updated to talk about POS systems, how data is obtained, retained, and how it should be available to the tax agencies and really to the retailers too. We found some point of sale systems that are so encrypted that the owner may only get summary information but not detailed information. So you really want a point of sale system that's user-friendly to the business and also friendly to any tax agency. Data retention and backup files are very important. Again, when we recently changed our law or updated our law, we talked about that to make sure the retailers knew about backup files on electronic data, which is much different than keeping a stack of paper anywhere. Access to obtain the data, both for the retailer and to the state. Again, some of the systems are so encrypted, they don't want access really at the retail level because they're afraid that the system may be manipulated. You got to have a system that's secure and yet accessible to both the public and the restaurant owner and the tax agency. And data needs to be secure through a well-engineered program. Sort of repeat what everyone else has said. Suppression really comes about more or less what we found so far is in a weaker engineered system versus a system, I don't want to give any brand names out, but certain systems that are more well-engineered have less employee theft, less suppression been found. Possible solutions, a comprehensive law against sales suppression that I think includes internet remote access and cloud manipulation of data. That's not only theory that you heard about, I can tell you that's practical what we found. I can't disclose certain cases that are going on, but that is what's occurring. More and more often, the point of sale system can be accessed remotely. There's legitimate business reasons to do that, and of course, anytime you can remote records remotely, you can also manipulate them remotely. So that has to be something that needs to be addressed or at least understood. Move towards integrity and security of data. You've kind of heard that here in many different ways. Increase sales recording. So it's not just suppression, but you got to have recorded sales to get into the system in order to have validity of the data and make sure the data is fully comprehensive to what you're looking for. I think the long-term solution, this is just me personally, not on my agency, is really some type of standardized POS system where you do have security of data. It already exists for credit cards. Most people cannot get credit card data because there's a standard out there for credit card encryption that exists on POS. So the same type of thought process or technology on a point of sale system is something that we see. Because one of the things we see just practically from auditors is really the intentional destruction of electronic data, the erasing of the data. We've actually seen them remove physically the point of sale system, that they don't have one, but we know they did. And so you don't gain anything when they actually erase the data either from an audit point of view. Our study in many ways mirrored what Quebec found, that you can have suppression both internally, externally, and there could be a lot of systems involved. We documented our first 175 cases. Our estimated loss was 122 million on those. That's measure, not tax. But you can see it's a fairly significant one if you do the math and look at the restaurants. So in the long term, I just think that the education, both to the public and within the tax agencies, is important, whether the long-term solution is some of the things you heard today. But we need to talk, we need to work together, and we need to continue this process.
Thank you. So is your pilot actually using a model like Quebec's?
No.
No. So your pilot is looking at all the questions?
It's really discovery, understanding, educating the public, seeing how big the problem is out there.
Mm-hmm. So when you say you found on 175 cases, 122 million, did I get your numbers right?
Right.
Meaning, so that's through more traditional audit evaluation of businesses, or?
Those are ones we can document that were actually suppressed. In other words, we have receipts and we have data that don't match. And those are positively ones that have there's certain patterns that exist with sales suppression, without getting into a lot of details, and we were able to confirm those. There's probably hundreds and hundreds more where the data was lost or the data was so badly damaged that we suspect sales suppression, but couldn't absolutely prove it.
And I know you're not the governor, you're not a legislator, and I'm not familiar enough with California laws to know the parallels, but is California exploring going down a road through its change in laws or just through regulation of attempting to implement black box or Quebec model or something else system?
Not at this point, although that option has been explained. We have 4 elected board members and our controller, and they're aware of that option that's sitting out there. I think maybe, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but maybe just a little bit more information about how big the problem is would maybe lead to that direction. There's, politically, there's a sensitive side of this too, as you heard from the Retail Association. So I don't have a real answer for you.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
So in New York, at least Dr. Ainsworth has evaluated that just in the restaurant sector, I guess restaurant and bars for fairness, we could potentially collect $1.7 billion in revenue. Has California done any evaluation for yourself on the estimates?
We estimated when the law was passed, 218 million was lost. So I think it's a little bit more than that. I'm not sure where the $1 billion comes from. But again, you're looking at sales not recorded, employee theft, and suppression. It's just not one element. So it's possible that if you start looking at other retail outlets other than the hospitality industry, that the numbers could grow.
But I think his data is only the hospitality.
Correct. I don't want to dispute his data.
No, I know.
I really don't have Quebec took 10 years to study this. I mean,
right.
I mean, we're kind of new into the study and seeing.
So no, the data from Sweden was 2 billion. For the hypothetical for New York is 1.7 billion. And Quebec was significantly lower, and California's, considering the size of California, which is much larger than New York, maybe you're just more honest out there in California than here in New York and Sweden.
I don't think anybody really has a grasp how big the problem may be. And how long it would take to really get a full and comprehensive study to look at that.
And because 23 or 24 states, I guess counting California, are comparing notes, and to some degree what we're doing here today is also trying to educate ourselves and compare notes. Are there other states that you're working with that you would recommend New York also go chat with and take a look at?
Certainly.
Okay. Any come to mind right
Washington
now?
is certainly a good state. Pennsylvania has a comprehensive program. I would say those two right now with that. Minnesota.
Okay. Everybody always goes to take a look at Minnesota. There's something interesting about Minnesota. And you talked about a number of changes in the regulations that people should look at. Were you able to make those changes? Is that what your 2014 AB 781 was about?
That was our suppression law that was passed. And one of the things on there was we describe what transactional data is. In other words, you should get a receipt that has a time, a date, the item purchased, how it was tendered, the change, should have a receipt number, an invoice number. All those things are in that law. I think that's important because, again, that information does get recorded into a point-of-sale system, and when suppression does occur, usually something is missing.
And then the other recommendations are more in the process of, so California's looking at your own tax laws that are perhaps 30 and 40 and 50
Yeah, we updated
years old.
our just the definition of records recently, and just really enhanced and defined the point-of-sale systems and electronic records and describing those.
So I know you've been here listening. So when the Retail Council was testifying that attempting to coordinate and work with the credit card processing companies is easier than said than done, has California had any experience trying to get coordination from the credit card companies?
We have not looked into that.
You have not looked into that at all yet? Are there other things you think New York ought to do sooner than later, based on your own
Well, I
experience in
can say,
California?
the cases that have come out, and the criminal cases and some of the civil cases, and we've had omissions, is that they've had these suppression systems for 6 to 8 years. So although Canada discovered this in the late 90s, even some of the cases that have been coming out more current, these people have been doing this for a while.
Right,
This wasn't just something new that came over in, 2010 and 11.
exactly.
They've had these suppression systems for a while, and I personally have had interviews with attorneys and taxpayers on this, and I was surprised that the discovery took so long.
And do you think your state is getting better at capturing and finding
We're
these?
getting better. It's a slow process, especially when we had to start really from scratch, and that's really why we started reaching out to others to see what they found. Don't do everything yourself. You can steal someone else's ideas or learn from each other, really.
And somebody testified earlier about more and more use of internet and cloud systems, so you don't even have to, have a physical piece of software there at
Now,
the
the
site.
remote access to their systems, both by accountants, attorneys, and folks with other intentions, is very popular. And even the restaurant owners having remote access to their systems. They can see real-time sales, what's going on in their business, that type of thing. So from a practical sense on their side, it does make sense to have remote access to see how the day's going, how sales are going. Again, anytime you can remove data from a restaurant and put it into a laptop or somewhere else, it also can be manipulated back into the restaurant.
The Quebec testimony was so interesting for so many reasons, including their attempt to evaluate where in their, I guess, private sectors they saw the biggest amount of tax fraud. Has California done any kind of research for yourselves?
No, we did something called the Little Hoover Commission study, but it was really looking at, all tax areas, not only sales tax, but income tax and employee taxes. So no, we haven't broke it down into a retail sector like they did.
And are you exploring any new projects for yourself in those other areas? I'm expanding my discussion of my hearing.
No, we have different agencies that cover those. Obviously, making them a little bit more aware of what sales suppression is, because a lot of times sales are suppressed to, pay labor, cash, which affects both income tax and your labor. Because it's expensive, labor is one of the most expensive things at a restaurant. You got to pay their share of Social Security taxes and other types of benefits. And, minimum wage went up both in California and New York to $15.
I know, we're constantly competing.
So you see that will, I think, will have a further impact on the bottom line.
And in fact, here in New York, there's been a lot of discussion and concern around wage theft issues for workers, particularly in certain industries where there's more of a cash model. Is that also fall
Yeah, it's not
within your purview?
my agency, but, through information that, I've read and stuff like that, certainly is a concern.
It's also an issue there. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming in from California.
Thank you.
To enlighten us and share your information. I hope that New York State is continuing to work in coordination with other states, because obviously, if we can come up with models that make sense across state borders, that's far more of a win for us all. And I think even to highlight my colleagues from the Retail Council who were, I think, a little hesitant about any actions the states make. Clearly, if states are going down the same road together in some way, it's less of a crisis for cross-state retail activities, because it's not, but California's making us do this, but New York's making us do something completely opposite. So I hope that we can all work together.
We all
going
face the same
forward.
challenges.
Exactly.
We do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony.